All right, I'm going to hit you with this, Steve, because it kind of goes along to how this whole sin before the Lord thing. It says this. People say Moses couldn't stand before God without being destroyed because of his sin, which is why God had to hide him in the cleft of the rock as he passed by. If that is the case, then how can Satan have access to heaven and stand before God's throne accusing the brethren? Wouldn't he be destroyed by God's presence because of his sin? Now, you already answered some of this, but how can sin stand before a holy God?
Well, the holy God is everywhere. And so he's not just up in heaven. So he's right here now, and I'm sinful, right?
Right.
And so it's not a question of how can sin stand before a holy God, because the holy God knows everything. He knows my sin before I ever commit it. You know, a lot of times when I think about the stuff that God has to go through in dealing with the human race, you know, earlier on I was talking about, you know, if I was God, I might have just started off with, you know, you guys are done, you guys are in, and I'm not messing with the whole thing, because I think it's a colossal chore for God to deal with all our nonsense. Can you imagine God looking at Hitler when he's a little kid and knowing everything that this guy is going to do, and still reaching out to him and working in his life and trying to draw him to himself? And
No, I can't really imagine that.
Yeah. Stalin. You know that Stalin went to seminary?
Did he?
Yes. And imagine, Stalin killed more people than Hitler. There's some estimates that Stalin killed 66 million of his own people. And then you have Mao, 100 million in China. And God knows these guys before they come along, and he doesn't just make them a grease spot on the pavement. He still reaches out to them. And so, you know, when you look at the situation with God, God is everywhere. He sees everything, and he's already seen it. He's already seen everything that's going to take place. So the Bible never teaches that sin, that God can't stand in the presence of sin. He's doing it every single day, and in ways that we can't even comprehend. Because not only does he see the outward sin, he sees the hearts too. And so the issue really isn't sin as far as standing in front of God. It's what I'm made of as far as standing in front of God. And so in 1 Corinthians, in chapter 15, Paul says about the resurrection, he says, as we have borne the image of the man of dust, talking about Adam, we shall also bear the image of the heavenly man, talking about Jesus. Now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does corruption inherit incorruption. It's the idea that my physical flesh is corrupted because of the fall. And it's not talking about a sinful thing. It's talking about, it's kind of the idea that I don't have a body that can exist in the place where God manifests himself. That's the idea behind it. So Paul goes on and he says, behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, this mortal must put on immortality. And so when this corruptible is put on incorruption, and the mortal is put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. And so what God has to do is do a literal change of my body. There's a passage in 1 John chapter 3 and verse 2. It says, we don't know what we're going to be, but we do know that when he appears, we're going to be like him. And then he gives this reason for that, because we're going to see him as he is. And so it's the idea of I'm in the manifest presence of God, and I'm seeing God in a fuller form than I've ever experienced God before. I'm seeing God essentially in what I would call his fullness. I don't think that it's absolutely his fullness, but it's his fullness in reference to me. And so if God were to appear right now in his fullness, as God said to Moses, it would destroy you. And it wasn't necessarily because of Moses' sin. It was because of Moses' body. He wasn't made to be in the presence of God in that sense. So,
okay.
Yep.